We are a little after 6, so I think we will go ahead and get started. Welcome to the League of Women Voters webinar on the Dignity Index. I'm Catherine Bealey, President of the League of Women Voters of Utah. I'm particularly excited about this timely issue following a partisan and contentious election season. I'm pleased to introduce to you our speaker tonight, Tami Pyfer. She is the Chief of Staff and Project Director for Unite and is the Utah lead for Unite's Dignity Index project, which we'll hear more about tonight. Prior to joining Unite, Tami was the Education Policy Advisor to Utah Governor Gary Herbert, where she was involved in state-level policy development, coalition building, and stakeholder engagement. Tami held local and state elected office for 12 years, during which time she was actively involved in numerous civic, community, and nonprofit organizations. Her professional training is in early childhood and K-12 special education for students with severe disabilities. She worked as a clinical instructor at Utah State University, teaching teacher preparation coursework and supervising student teachers. Please join me in welcoming Tami Pyfer, who also has some nice personal information to give us too. Take it away, Tami.
Thank you, Kathy. I'm super excited to be with you tonight. I love the League of Women Voters, and I was honored to be invited to present. Part of my bio, I have a wonderful husband of 42 years and 5 children, and 4 of them have spouses, and 9 grandchildren until this morning, and now I have 10. So our 10th grandchild was born this morning, a little girl. She's beautiful. I was able to run down to Utah County and squeeze her a little bit before I came back up to Salt Lake Valley. So anyway, I'm really excited about that news. So I am really excited about this information I'm going to present. I'm going to ask for a little bit of forgiveness and patience ahead of time. I've got a PowerPoint, but I need to switch back and forth between a couple of videos and a website. So if you'll just bear with me a little bit, it might be a little rough going back and forth. My apologies. So let me start by sharing my screen. And this is the part, like, you get to see my whole screen because when I try to share just the window, it doesn't work as well. So here we go. So as Kathy said, the organization that I am a part of right now is called Unite. I came to Unite after 7 years in the governor's office, and I'll give you just a little bit of background about that. But Unite, our main project and initiative right now is called the Dignity Index. We believe that this is a solution for division. So who you see here on the left, you probably recognize as Governor Herbert, my old boss. And on the right is Tim Shriver, my new boss, or better said, a new colleague of mine. This photo was taken in January of 2020, right before the world shut down. Tim Shriver came and spoke at the governor's education summit. And we had educators from public ed, higher ed, business leaders from all over Utah Valley come to hear Tim Shriver and another couple of speakers and talk. And what's interesting about this picture is that you have a very conservative Republican governor on the left and a fairly liberal Democrat. He's not a politician, but he comes from a political family. His mother, Eunice Kennedy Shriver, started Special Olympics. His uncle was the president of the United States, John F. Kennedy, and another uncle, Bobby Kennedy, and Ted Kennedy, who worked so closely with Orrin Hatch, as we know. So you've got the left and the right here. And what you see here, you don't see very often. And that is 2 individuals who are highly engaged in politics, who are highly motivated to change the country for the better, coming from opposite sides of the political spectrum, who get along and are good friends. And I love this picture because to me, it's a model of what we can be and should be doing in the country, and that is crossing divides so that we can solve problems. So I joined Tim's group, Unite, as a volunteer shortly after the pandemic shut things down. I was no longer able to travel to the Capitol during the pandemic for the first couple of months, worked from home. I sing in the Tabernacle Choir, or I did sing in the Tabernacle Choir at that point. We weren't singing, and I had some time open up on my schedule. And so I joined as a volunteer this group called Unite in an effort to find ways to heal our toxic political divides. And the work that began for me in 2020, it began with this group at Unite, actually in 2018, has resulted now in the development of what we call the Dignity Index. And we believe that the Dignity Index is our chance, our tool, our mechanism to ease divisions, prevent violence, and solve problems. We believe that the problem is contempt. Arthur Brooks, who is a well-known conservative author, speaker, he was recently named an Impact Scholar at the University of Utah. He writes that we have a cultural addiction to contempt, an addiction abetted by the outrage industrial complex, and it's tearing us apart. If we want to solve the polarization problem of today, we have to solve the contempt problem. He wrote that in a book called Love Your Enemies, which I would highly recommend. I read that early in 2020 and passed that along to my Unite colleagues, and it has really become foundational to the work that we are doing with the Dignity Index. When Arthur talks about the outrage industrial complex, he's referring to the structure of our media system, it's designed, a lot of the media, not all of it, but as you know from social media and some of the media that we read or that we watch on television or in videos, is designed to make us angry. And it works. We become outraged and we become addicted to that outrage. And because we're outraged, we have to get our next fix of what's happening. And I can't turn away from this channel because I have to find out what those guys are doing to me, what the other side is doing to me. This is what he means by the outrage industrial complex. And he will, as he often says in his presentations, someone's getting rich off of making us angry and outraged and hating each other. And it's not us. There are people benefiting financially from this outrage industrial complex. So we are taking this problem of solving the contempt problem very seriously. Arthur Brooks, this is Arthur and Tim, who have done a couple of different presentations together. Again, someone from the left, someone from the right, who, when you get into conversation, share so many of the same goals and values and outlooks. Some of the strategies that they may have to solve a particular policy issue might differ, but overall, we're on the same page. We believe that contempt has become the language of political speech in America. And this is Amanda Ripley, an author who recently wrote High Conflict. She said that political speech, we know from the research, can incite violence. As recently as June of this year, a University of Chicago poll found that more than 1 in 4 people said that it may soon be necessary to take up arms against the government. Think of that when you think of the use of language that can incite violence. And people are saying, this might be in our very near future, which to me is really very problematic. It scares me, frankly. So we believe that the solution to contempt is dignity. This is Dr. Donna Hicks, another researcher and scholar and writer who we base a lot of our work on. She says that our longing to be treated with dignity is the single most powerful force motivating our behavior. It transcends race, gender, ethnicity, and all other social distinctions. Donna is an international conflict resolution specialist. She's worked all over the globe. She worked closely with Bishop Desmond Tutu in solving some of the conflict in Northern Ireland. She worked in South Africa. She's worked in South America. She's worked in Asia. And she will say that oftentimes when they came to an impasse in the group she was working with, the thing that was able to turn the dialogue and open the dialogue was when one party showed another party dignity, just even a modest gesture of dignity. That's what changed the conversation. So that's why we are building our index on this principle of dignity. Our definition of contempt is that contempt is a feeling of disdain and disgust for another person or group. When we feel contempt, we see ourselves above other people. So this is me. I see myself above you. Dignity is the inherent worth that we all have from birth. And that's when I see myself in you. I don't see myself above you. I see myself in you. A lot of terms that we have heard and that many people use in this space include civility or respect. And those are great terms, and we believe they have their place in the discussion. But we believe, as Arthur Brooks noted actually in his book, Love Your Enemies, that civility is kind of this basic level. We will be civil to people. Respect is a step above that, in my opinion, is above civility. Dignity, to me, is for the top of the levels that we're looking at treating other people, this inherent worth that we all have from birth. We believe that dignity can solve the contempt problem. Again, we believe that division is not caused by difference or disagreement, but division is caused by contempt. It's not that I disagree with you necessarily on a policy issue. It's what I do because I disagree with you. Do I hold you in contempt? And that when contempt breaks us apart, we believe that dignity can bring us back together. So we feel that we need to unite around one core principle, and that is that everyone should be treated with dignity and no one should be treated with contempt. I will say right now that some of the criticism that we received is that people say, oh, you just want us to all get along. You just all want us to be the same. That when you say unite, that we all have to give up our principles and we all have to give in and compromise. And I don't want to do that. I feel strongly about my principles. When we say unite, we say you hold fast to your principles. You hold fast to your belief. We want people to unite around that one core principle, and that's everyone should be treated with dignity. So the difficulty of promoting dignity is that it's hard to maximize what we can't measure. I learned this in my work in special education when, as a teacher in the classroom, you're trying to change a student's behavior, for example. How do I know if the student's getting better if I can't measure what that behavior is that I want the student to exhibit? So we pulled this quote from last year, a congressional hearing. Representative Emmanuel Cleaver from Missouri said that there are agencies and organizations that score us on everything we do, except there's not a single organization that monitors and scores us for decency and civility. It's easy to come to the conclusion that that's not important. And as Kathy mentioned in my introduction, I've been an elected official for 12 years, 8 years on my local city council, 4 years on the State Board of Education, and 7 years in the governor's office appointed. But when I was an elected official, I got, rated on a lot of things. I would get surveys in the mail that I would have to answer. And then they would say, oh, she's good for education, or she's terrible for education. She's great on the economy, or I don't believe what she thinks about, clean air initiatives. But there's not any of these ratings that are applied that have to do with decency, civility, and what we would say dignity. So that's where we come in with the Dignity Index. And what the Dignity Index is, it's a scale that goes from 1 to 8, and it measures speech. And it grades that speech or scores that speech from a continuum of contempt, which is down at the low level 1, to dignity, which is at the high level. And we are careful to not score people or rate people, but rather the language that people use. Because as you'll discover, I think shortly, we all can use language that's at the bottom end of the scale, middle part of the scale, or the high end of the scale. And it depends on the situation, depends on our mindset. I find myself, dipping down into 4, sometimes a 3, I'll confess. I try to hover around a 6 or 7, but But we don't want to say you're a 6 or you're a 7, because it defeats the whole goal that we're looking for, which is to treat people with dignity, but to call attention to speech, which might be a problem and it might be preventing some real problem solving from happening. In extreme cases, the language that people use may be inciting violence. So the index focuses on language, and it's language that's typically spoken in moments of conflict. And it calls attention to the words or phrases that are either uniting us or dividing us. We believe that this index reveals how we treat each other, what we do when we disagree, and how we respond when we're hurt or angry. I just want to underscore this a little bit. There's some language that's not scoreable by our scale, because it's, if you're giving someone a compliment, it's like, that's nice, but it's not exactly what we're looking at how we speak to each other in moments of conflict or disagreement, especially when we're hurt, or when we're angry, or when we're fearful. And a lot of times that's what we've seen in our demonstration project here in Utah, when we have been made to be afraid of the other side. When the outrage industrial complex is trying to stoke fear and suspicion, then we see what kind of language that we use as a result of that. So the bottom 4 points on the scale are the contempt, in the area of contempt. At the very bottom, it's language such as, they're not even human, it's our moral duty to destroy them before they destroy us. This is, what you see where genocide starts and these types of conflicts. Number 2 above that is, those people are evil and they're going to ruin our country if we let them. It's us or them. I want you to think for a minute about some of the political speech that we hear from people all over the country, sometimes within our state, sometimes within our political circles, sometimes within our families or ourselves. When you start to hear people calling other people evil and that they're going to ruin our country, you're down in the 2 level. 3 is, we're the good people and they're the bad people. It's us versus them. I'm not necessarily calling you evil and that you're ruining our country. It's us or them, but I believe that other side is the bad side. They're the bad people. 4 is when we're saying we're better than those people. I don't trust them. So that's just 4 is when you're just starting to dip into the bottom part of the scale, which is the contempt side. Now, on the happier side of the scale is the dignity side of the scale. When you get to a 5, it's basically the other side has a right to be here and a right to be heard. It's their country too. My own personal shorthand for this is, when people talk about civility, I picture 5 as civility. Everyone has a right to be here. They have a right to be heard. It's their country too. 6 is when you start looking for values and interests that you share with the other side. I always talk to the other side, and I'm going to find things that we have in common so that I can, start to develop a relationship with the other side. 7 is when you don't look just for things that you have in common, but you look for things that you have that are not in common, areas where you disagree, and you fully engage with the other side, discussing those values and interests that you don't share, trying to learn where that person is coming from. And then 8 is when we have achieved this level that, I'm going to be honest, is a stretch for most of us. It's a stretch for me. And this is when we have let go of our need to be right, our need to control the situation. And we believe that every one of us is born with inherent worth. And so we treat everyone with dignity, no matter what. We treat people who have hurt us. We treat people who we disagree with. We treat people who we think have really bad policy and political decisions, but we still hold on to this principle that everyone is born with inherent worth, and so we treat them with dignity. So I'm going to take just a second here, and I want to take you to the website. And this is where I appreciate your. So this is if you go to the website dignityindex.us. You can start off by taking the pledge. We put that right at the top, right out of the chute, when we were hoping that people will take a look at our pledge. And this is our pledge. We're calling this a new patriotism. And we believe that there's no America without democracy, that there's no democracy without healthy debate, and that there's no healthy debate without dignity. Therefore, I pledge to do more to treat others with dignity and not with contempt. That's the pledge. If you sign the pledge, you will be added to our community, and you'll get some updates from us. Right now, we're sending out just a short newsletter every other week, and you can unsubscribe anytime that you'd like. But we're hoping to get this whole community of people taking the pledge and starting to pay attention to where they're at on the scale, and to recognize when they may be falling into contempt. This is part of our Utah pilot. We scored political speech, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. Excuse me. So beginning in October, we followed the candidates for the 4 House seats and the 2 Senate seats. And we collected their social media posts and interviews that they did. We looked at statements. We looked at their fundraising email. We looked at third-party emails that were coming from outside the state. And we scored those. If you go through the website, it will show you what those scores look like. And let's click on this one quickly. This is our fundraising emails. We talk a little bit about what we were looking for and what some of these fundraising emails highlighted. And then we issued scores. So this was an Evan McMullen score. He got a 3. And we talk about why that was a 3. A defining feature of a 3 is a moral character attack. So when you attack the character of your opponent, that gets you a 3. This was a 4. We went down to Senator Mike Lee's fundraising emails. Most of what we found in the campaign were in the 3 and 4 range. And I think anyone who was in Utah and watched any of the ads that came on TV or got fundraising flyers in your email would probably agree that it was a lot of 3 and 4 level speech that we had. So this is the part that is really kind of fun to play with. And this is the dignity index again. If you just hover over this, it tells you those brief statements that I reviewed with you. But if you click on it, it will give you just a little bit more insight. So level 1 escalates from violent words to violent actions. And then it tells you a little bit about that. 2, 3, 4. So level 4, we mock the other side and we attack their commitment, their beliefs, their competence, their performance. It's when we're saying we're better than they are. They're different. They don't belong. They're not really one of us and we shouldn't trust them. So you can go through the index itself on the website and start learning a little bit more about those levels. You can learn more about our initiative here. And I've got a couple of pictures on the slides. And then we talk about some of the people that have joined our movement. If you're not ready to take the pledge yet, you can sign up here to join our email database and get some updates for us or from us until you feel like you're ready to take the pledge, which I hope won't be long. So let me just tell you a little bit about the Utah project. So this is a national initiative. Oh, hold on, I gotta move these people. Nope. Sorry. There we go. So this is a national initiative, but we pilot tested it in Utah. I shouldn't say it in the past tense. We finished phase 1 of our pilot project here in Utah. And it's been really, really exciting. So these are 3 of my colleagues that are on our national team. Tom Roschert, who is the architect of the Dignity Index, Tim Shriver, who's the founder of Unite, and Misha Lorado Robinson, who is working on our community engagement. And I am the Utah Demonstration Project lead. These are the student coders from the University of Utah. We partnered with the university and the Hinckley Institute of Politics and the Kim Gardner Policy Institute. We recruited 23, they're not all in the picture here, but we recruited 23 undergraduate and graduate students from a variety of fields. Most of them are in political science, some were in psychology. One was a social worker, one of our graduate students, and they're from a politically diverse background. We've got coders from the left, coders from the right, coders somewhere in between, and we train them on the Dignity Index. We have a coding guide. Those teachers out there that are listening tonight will recognize it as a rubric that we use to actually score the speech. These young people were fantastic. At the end of the presentation, I'll share a link where you can watch a 25-minute summary of the project. And we've interviewed some of these students, and I think you'll get a feel for how dynamic and inspiring they were and what they learned about this process and what it took to, where they would be from different political backgrounds. And yet when they sat with language from a speech in front of them and the coding guide, how they were able to come to consensus. It was just really exciting and inspiring for us. For the Utah pilot, we have our own advisory council here, just in Utah. We partnered with the University of Utah, the Hinckley Institute of Politics, the Cam Gardner Institute, BondCom, which is Bonneville Communications, and Y2 Analytics, which is a surveying group. And these are our board of directors. I think you'll recognize some of these people. Governor Herbert is on our board. These are people that have been involved in the political space or in the communications space, and they cross the political spectrum as well. We're almost half and half, half Democrat, half Republican. I think we're maybe lean one more on the right than on the left, but very diverse group who've been highly engaged. And what we wanted to do was talk about or prove how we use the index to change the culture of contempt. How can our little tool, our project here, how can we actually change the culture of contempt? So we believe that we can use the index to start a conversation about how we talk to each other, exploring the incentives for contempt, the tactics that we use for contempt, and ask ourselves, why am I using contempt? When do we use it? What does it do for us? And what does it do to us? And what happens if we respond with dignity instead? This is what we're testing with this pilot. We had Y2 Analytics did some focus groups for us before we launched the pilot. And we tweaked some of the project based on the input that we had from Utah voters, Republicans and Democrats. This was some of what we heard from these groups. Katrina said, I have family members who have gotten so entrenched in their political views that even when you're in person and talking, it can escalate very quickly. Christina said it's ruined some relationships on my side of the family. And Lisa said, I don't know how we change this climate. It's so far gone. I don't know if we will ever come back. The hard part, she said, I think is that we all struggle with is that we want to stand up for what we believe in. How do we do that without getting attacked or attacking? And that, I mean, her statement there has really resonated with us. How, and she's a Republican woman from rural Utah. How can I give my opinion and my passions and what I feel I stand for? How can I express that without attacking and without being attacked? We reviewed the solution. We went over the Dignity Index with them, our draft of that, and asked them, do you think something like this might actually help you? It might impact your speech or the way you think about your speech. Jason said, absolutely, yes. The analogy is, again, it's easy to tell stories to people years later about how you were such an 8. It's another thing to watch a video of yourself in the heat of the moment and say, well, maybe I wanted to be an 8, but I sure looked like a 5. And this is an opportunity for me to confess to you that once I started working with the index, I realized that there are a lot of times when my first reaction to whether it was a piece of legislation or a policy maybe on the school board that a group was pushing, my first reaction often was a level 4. I'm better than you. You don't know what you're talking about. And all of a sudden I'm going to set this up to be a battle instead of being open to say, oh, I want to listen to your side. And I think this is one of the things that people have reported to us over and over and over during this pilot was they used the index thinking that they were using it to score political speech. when what really impacted them was that they started to turn it on themselves and say, oh, wait a second, that sounds like me, and that's not who I think I am. Lindsay said I think the index is worthy. I know that me personally, I've been trying to see where I'm at, and I kind of look like I'm at a 6. I'm always looking at improving. So I can look at 7 and 8 and say, this is the person I want to be. And that's what I have found for me. It's like, it's who I thought I was is often not who I behave like in my internal dialogue. I've never been someone to throw flames, and publicly attack people and that kind of thing. But in my mind, where it's just as important to hold the right language in conversation. Otherwise, I'm not going to set up a good problem solving situation for myself. And in my mind, I'm not where sometimes I think I should be or where I thought I was. So part of this picture of success first in the pilot was, can we become more aware of our use of contempt in the way we speak? Can our awareness of contempt encourage us to speak with more dignity? And does the use of dignity change the way we feel about ourselves, our country, and people on the other side? Lessons learned in the Utah pilot. Definitely the index has worked to start a conversation. I mentioned earlier some of the criticism that we've received to us is a plus because we've started a conversation. And it's helped for us. The criticism has been very helpful for us in reframing our own thoughts about this and finding where we're not being very clear in our explanations. That clarity and understanding of difference between principles and dignity is critical. And this is where, again, some of the criticism is, I don't want to give up my principle. We don't want you to give up your principles. But we think there's a way to communicate your principles and stand by your principles with dignity. And so we need to work harder to have clarity and understanding of that, the difference. We found that the media is very interested in this, and I'll share a couple of slides with you on that, and that business is interested. We have a group of businesses that early on said, I want to be part of this project. I talked with someone this morning who is not a business group, but it's an education related group that said, I want to be part of this project. I've talked to groups that work with community organizations last week that said, we want to be part of this project. We want to use this in our culture, in our business culture, in our community culture, in our nonprofit culture. And what we have found is that evangelists are born. Once you see this, it's hard to unsee it, and it's hard to now start thinking a different way. In several of the media visits that we had and the media that was posted online, you'll have people who say, this changed me. It's changed the way I speak to my kids. It's changed the way I look at problems. And again, we have people who want to join a cause. I'm just going to tell you a kind of a quick fun story. I've got this on my phone. The Governor Herbert gave me permission to share this, by the way. So we have a text thread that's the people that used to work in Governor Herbert's administration. And someone had posted kind of a funny thing about how they had driven by a Kentucky Fried Chicken, and they described this thing on the menu, which I find disgusting. And they said, made me think of Governor Herbert and how he loved that particular dish. So I posted like the emoji where your face is green and you're about ready to throw up. And Governor Herbert posted this. He said, never mind Tami. She was raised in Montana. And then he said, uh-oh, Tami, does this comment mean I score low on a dignity scale? And I had to say, I said, you're correct, Governor. That does not score well on a dignity scale because you're at a 4. You're saying you're different than me. I don't trust you. I said that would be a 4 to be exact. And then I posted the 4. And then Governor Herbert said, I would like to appeal your ruling. I think you are too biased on the issue to be rendering a judgment on an honest evaluation of your cultural upbringing. I would like a more independent ruling, preferably from people not from Montana. But it just, I'm illustrating the point that once you start to see this and get familiar with each of these steps, you just can't help but use it. In fact, my daughter was at our house for Thanksgiving, and the day before, the rest of the family showed up. She came and sat down. She said, Mom and Dad, all you have is old people food in the fridge. And my husband said, I think that's a 4. I think you just illustrated a 4 for us. And so then we had to discuss what a 4 was. And And there was some discussion whether it was a 3 or a 4. It was definitely a 4. It was not a 3. But these are the kind of discussions we want people to have. It's the kind of thought process that we want. So I mentioned that the media has been interested in this. This is one of the articles that was published in the Deseret News. I can send you a link to these. And this was kind of a summary that we did, a wrap up of the pilot project so far. This was the media coverage that we had over, I think it was a 7-week period. And there's even some media that I don't have links to here, but it was rich media coverage. These are some of the businesses that have signed on to be Dignity ambassadors. We've got the Women's Leadership Institute, the Raise Your Hand Utah. This is a group that it contacted me a couple of weeks ago, but then confirmed with me this morning that they are all in on this. So our goals long-term is that we want politicians and private citizens to take a pledge to check their own language and improve their dignity scores. We want groups to form to help people break their addiction to contempt. I'm reminded of a Facebook friend that I've had for a while. And about a year ago, I remember she just got frustrated with what people were posting on Facebook. And she said, I'm changing who I interact with. And, I'm tired of the inflammatory, toxic rhetoric. And those are the kind of people, if she starts a Facebook group and they study these principles, that's success. We want reporters and commentators to use the index as they report on politics and culture. We would hope that this catches on nationally so that during the next national presidential election, that reporters start using the scale and they report on maybe the major speeches or the debates using points on the scale. And we want cross-partisan coalitions to come together to support candidates who promote dignity. We want 500,000 dignity voters. This is a top-down, bottom-up approach. Think of the power that the League of Women Voters has and could have if they linked arms with other leagues of women voters and other organizations and these businesses that I listed on the screen just now, that they all linked arms and said, we're taking the pledge and we are going to be dignity voters. We are going to look for people to support locally, state level, and federally who are dignity candidates. Think of the power. And then our goal is that political speech in general has more dignity and less contempt. We hope that politicians eventually will be rewarded, not for contempt, not for fear mongering, not for being part of the outrage industrial complex, but they will be rewarded at the ballot box because of the dignity in their speech, that they treat people, their opponents, with dignity, and they talk about how to solve problems and not how to hate the other guy. I want to share just a couple of clips here in closing with you, because these are some of our partners, and they can say this better than I can say this. And this first one, well, actually, this is Mara, who is on our board of directors. And this was from a recent interview that she gave.
Persuasive tool. You're actually not giving up your core beliefs. Yeah. You're finding a better way to share those with someone else who's coming from a different point of view. There's really important efforts to change hearts and minds and have public discussions. But what I like about this is it focuses on behaviors, and behaviors are changeable, and behaviors are what impact and set the table for the public space and public dialogue. And so the achievability of this is that it is a behavioral change we all can make. We're still holding our same opinions, right? Yeah, that's right? But we're asking for a social contract that says this is what we accept when you're in the public domain, specifically in policy.
And this is Boyd Matheson, who's also on our advisory board, and he was on the same panel.
This is not about kumbaya group hugs or any kind of, fake niceties that we can often get trapped into. This is about how we speak in terms of elevating the conversation to something a little bit different. I think in this country, we can talk about anything. It's how we talk about it that actually matters. And the way we've been talking about things has actually kept us a really safe distance from actually solving the problems. So part of the Dignity Index for me is a self-awareness in terms of how am I approaching this, just because we we disagree on something, am I now seeing them as the enemy? Am I filled with contempt towards them because they disagree with me? Because that contempt issue, the bottom end of the scale, means that because we disagree, you are worthless to me. And so I can melt down your Twitter feed, I can blow up your social media, and I can feel good about myself and go to church on Sunday and just be great. And so it's really getting us beyond just those very easy, very partisan kind of arguments, and actually getting to conversations that lead us to good principles and good policy.
And this last one is Tim Schreiber. And this one, I've listened to this so many times because it really reflects kind of how I have been feeling on reflecting on my own language.
The answer is clearly no. Actually, what works,
All right.
the way we talk to each other is sometimes hidden from us. We sometimes think we can convince someone of our point of view by humiliating them. And we don't stop to pause and say, wait a second, is that likely to work? Is it likely to be successful that by calling you names, by accusing you of horrible qualities, by humiliating you for your position, you're going to be won over? The answer is clearly no. Actually, what works to actually win people over, just practically speaking, is letting them be seen and heard and feel like their point of view matters too, even if you disagree with it. So we're not trying to tell people to suppress your point of view. We're trying to say that in the other is God-given, if I can use that language, dignity. Don't violate it. Don't attack in a way that is likely to make that person descend towards the same kind of acrimony and hatred. And let's also be clear, the stakes here are high. For our country, we've looked at this through history. Violent-sounding speech leads to violence. Hatred leads to violence. It's not just divisiveness, which is problematic. It's not just emotional pain or relationship breakdowns, which are very painful, but it's also the risk to the cultural fabric and to being able to solve problems that matter. So dignity is a notch higher than being nice or civil. It's actually seeing in the other some of yourself.
Let me just wrap up here with my last slide. Again, this is our pledge. This is what we hope people can internalize. We believe that dignity is the foundation of a new patriotism, that there's no America without democracy, that there's no democracy without healthy debate, and that there's no healthy debate without dignity. And we believe the Dignity Index is a way to reveal the language of dignity and the language of contempt within each of us, within our families, within our communities, and help us to have more dignity and less contempt. Again, I'm super honored to be here. One more small apology. It's hard for me to teach without seeing people. So I hope that you were able to get a little bit of my passion and enthusiasm for this in my presentation. And I'm happy now to take questions.
Yes, Tami, there were a couple of questions in the Q&A. The first was from Molly Swanger. She's asking, is this similar to a sentiment analysis tool programmed with different criteria, she says? I'm
not familiar with the sentiment analysis. I'm familiar with disposition, like disposition assessments. So in a way, it is similar to that. Part of the work in developing this, which has taken about 2 years, is based on, we've got a whole bibliography, and it's stage theory is the main thing. Tom Roscher, that's what his graduate work was in. It was in stage theory. And Molly, you're probably right. And if I were a little bit more knowledgeable or articulate on that particular assessment, it sounds like it is, and maybe you can respond too on that, but I do know that it's very much like a disposition. We look at the mindset as you look at the scale, even online, it's the mindset or the subtext behind each of those stages.
Peggy, can we unmute Molly to see if she has any clarification?
And I'd love to get an email, Molly, from you if you've got information that could be helpful. Part of this pilot for us was refining the scale and finding especially the students helped us. Like, is there better language that we can use to describe what we mean here? Can we tweak? Can we refine? And so we're taking that feedback now and actually refining the scale, refining the scoring guide. So we would love to have any input that you have or feedback that you have.
Molly can speak if she wants to just go off mute. So I think she has. We're good.
Hi. Sentiment analysis is, I'm referring to more like the IT sort of product tool, something with, machine learning that you can program, and, you can run speeches through, you can run ads through, et cetera, et cetera. But it's something that's a little bit more coded out, programmatic, versus necessarily needing human intervention.
Yes. Okay, great question. We have been looking at machine learning and AI tools. We've met with several people who are eager to help us with that. And one of our key PhDs on the team, who has worked with groups across the country on AI and machine learning, he said the other day, he said, if you would have asked me earlier this year, I would have said it's going to take about 5 years to get and train AI to be able to have the level of differentiation on this scale. He said, but if you ask me now, I think we're months away, actually, because of the way that machine learning and AI has progressed. And we've watched several demonstrations, and it's very, very promising what we've seen. And I mean, the things we've thought about for the AI application or machine learning application could be like Grammarly, only it's for the dignity index. When I type in an email or I type a post on social media, I get a box that pops up and says, this looks like a 3 on the contempt scale. Did you really mean to say this? Here's another way you could say this. Or if people are going to score political speech, if we want the media to use that and journalists to use it, that they can feed it through a filter, and it comes up with flags on different parts of the speech that are at different levels. It's what we did learn is that we couldn't code one debate, the whole entire debate with one number, because you go in and out of these different the stages. At part of the debate, some of the candidates were like at a 7, and then they would slip down into a 3, or they would be a 4, depending on the topic and what they were discussing. So that's one of the challenges of machine learning. But even if you had a tool that could flag the different parts of the speech for you, then you could say, this is where I need to improve. I see that I keep saying the same thing, and that's not what I mean. So it's the application for AI and machine learning is very promising.
Tami, why don't you give us an email at which to reach you?
Yes, I'm going to type it right here. So it's just Tami@unite.us. And you can go to dignityindex.us, and that gets you onto our website. You can, and if you have general questions and you don't necessarily, want to email me, or if you forget, you can just email dignityindex@unite.us. We collect questions and feedback on the tool itself at that email address. There's a lot of media those 3 clips that I showed you came from a wonderful Hinckley report that was posted the day after Thanksgiving last Friday. And it's really a rich discussion. And they have the language that I wish I was eloquent enough to use. And I think it's something that would be very beneficial for your organization.
Okay. Susan Sandak is asking you to clarify what you mean by evangelists who are born. Can you
Yeah, what I mean is it's not in a religious sense at all. People that will get a hold of this, and then they think about it, they talk about it, they apply it to their family, they apply it to their text threads. You just can't help but think about it, and they spread the message. We have people that want their business to do this, they want their family to adopt it, they want more materials. They are so excited about it and feel so strongly about the index being a tool to change our culture politically and to ease divisions, that they evangelize. They start now spreading the good news of the dignity index.
Okay, David Carrier has a question. He says, can you say a bit about the relationship between actual thoughts versus what you say? Many of my thoughts are sub 4, but my speech is ranked high.
Yeah.
My issue is my actual thoughts.
Yeah. And, you know, that's a level that I'm with you. Is it David? That it's our thoughts become words, our words become action. And I don't have any expertise in telling you how to change your thoughts. I find myself, again, my first reaction often, especially to anger or fear, is those dirty, rotten guys. I can't believe they're doing that. It's us versus them. I'm going to gear up for battle. But if I can catch myself at the thought stage, because I've internalized this dignity index and go, Tami, you just gave like a 3, maybe a 2, and that's not where I want to be. And I think we find this in every aspect of our life, really, is that we aspire to change and be better in a variety of areas. And if we can catch ourselves at the thought stage and not let it come out of our mouth, we can be better. I heard this quote the other day, is that sometimes we think that we will think ourselves into a new way of acting when really we act ourselves into a new way of thinking. And that's the fake it till you make it mentality, right? I'm going to start speaking with dignity. I'm going to catch myself and not let those words out of my mouth. I'm going to think of how to reframe that. And if I can do that enough, if I can change the behavior, even though sometimes my heart's not in it, that still helps me change my thoughts. So I think I wouldn't give up on yourself. I certainly am in the same boat and work on this all the time.
So this is all about us, not about us changing someone else. Is that correct?
Yeah, and when you watch the piece from the Hinckley report, Tim says this very well. When we got going on this pilot project, none of us expected anything other than people using the scale to score politicians, or their speech, and to say, I'm going to vote for this person because they have more dignity. I'm going to not vote for this person. That's what we've had in our mind. We have been surprised, delighted, and amazed that really the application people are most excited about is application to themselves, the mirror that we use to see ourselves differently so that we are not part of the problem anymore. I mean, if 500,000 dignity voters in the state of Utah said, you know what, I'm going to change the way I think, I'm going to change the way I speak, and I'm going to hold the people I vote for to the same standard. I just think of the sea change that we would have in politics.
I hope we can.
I think we can.
Yeah, you mentioned contempt. I think, I don't like the idea of contempt. I don't like to feel contempt. But when someone, and you also mentioned the word policy, what about those politicians who really have no policy issues? All they have is the ability to demean someone else. How does one stop feeling contempt for that person?
Yeah. One of the things that we feel really strongly about this index, and our tagline is that we want to ease divisions, we want to prevent violence, and we want to solve problems. And we feel like it's so important for politicians to change the way they interact because they can't solve problems. Think back to the campaign, the Utah campaign. And whether you're a Republican or Democrat, I'm just going to give you for example, let's say, Kathy, it's you and I spend 6 weeks, 8 weeks talking about how terrible you and your party are. You're awful. You're ruining America. And it's me versus you. So now let's say I win and I have to sit by and work with people from your party. How likely are they going to be to work with me when I've just spent 8 weeks saying how horrible they are? We cannot solve problems with this approach. So to your question, how do we stop feeling contempt for people that we feel really are ruining the country? It's a struggle. One of the things that we are looking at, that we've started to do, is to develop some materials with strategies for us. The first strategy that we have is just really this awareness level. Look at the scale, try and see yourself in that other. Is there anything? Can you get to a 5? Can you just say, I disagree with all of their policy. In fact, I don't even know what their policy is because they never talk about it. I disagree with how they talk to people, but they are a human. They were born with inherent dignity, and it's their country too. And I'm going to try to not be a 4. I'm going to try to just see a little bit of myself in you. Sometimes what I've tried to do during the campaign season was frame it as, I bet that person loves their children. Maybe they have grandchildren that they love. That is something we have in common. I disagree immensely and passionately with what they're doing, but I can see a little bit of myself in them. And it's interesting how that little bit of thinking has helped shift me out of this mode that I have. And again, I think, Kathy, you said it before, it's like changing ourselves versus trying to change others. And there's a lot that we can do when we change ourselves, and we can change the expectations that we have of our elected officials that way.
Wow. Well, thank you so much. I'm not sure that we have any other questions, but this is an important exercise, I think. We should all go to the Dignity Index, take the pledge, see what's going on. It is our country. That is one thing the League of Women Voters believes. It is everyone's country. So
Yes.
it's our job to fight for dignity.
Can I, just in closing, I would love to have feedback from your organization. You're more involved probably than the average person in politics, but I would love to just have you experiment with this a little bit. Take a look at the index. Tell me what resonates with you, what doesn't resonate, what applications you see it having. And if you were to pick this up and be one of our evangelists, that's just the term that I came up with the other day, but that you feel like this could really help our culture, I would love to hear from you on what material would you need? What resources would you like? That I can help you in your posts on Facebook or in what you're doing with your company culture. What do you need from us? And I want to take your input and make this better.
Well, thank you so much. You asked for it, so you will.
I am asking for
get
it. Okay, I hope so.
We are the League. So
Yay,
thank
yay,
you, everybody, for participating. And thank you so much, Tami. This has been fantastic.
Thank you for having me. My pleasure.
Hope to see more of you later.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
everybody.